A familiar story as the Pacers play well for about 45, 46 minutes, don't have enough late, and lose to the Boston Celtics. They lose game 4. They get swept out of the Eastern Conference Finals. What happened in this series? What went wrong? What went right? And what comes next in the offseason for the Pacers? Rhett Bauer joins us to talk about it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we are talking about the playoffs for one of the last times. Pacers Celtics game 4 last night. Pacers once again play well for a while, and once again don't play well down the stretch, lose in the clutch, lose 3 times in similar fashion. And it's a sweep for the Celtics, who beat the Pacers and earned it in every single way in the conference finals. We're going to talk about it all. Rhett Bauer, the closer of these series, as he has been all playoffs, is going to join us for it all once again. The good things for the Pacers in this game, the bad things for the Pacers in this game, themes from the series, what it means going forward. It was a lot of blend of series recapping and game recapping and kind of looking ahead. And we did some X interviews after the game in the media room with some players, and we talked about the offseason too. So lots of bouncing around. Rhett and I are both at the game about everything that happened for the Pacers Monday night and a little bit of look ahead. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's just get right to it. Rhett Bauer is here. You know what that means. That means the series is over. He's the closer, and the Pacers have been closed. Their season is over. Conference finals swept by the Boston Celtics. What a strange series, Rhett. You were there in Gainbridge Fieldhouse tonight for game 4, and here's what I'll say, Rhett. I think the Pacers should propose a rule change that specifically the Eastern Conference Finals should play 46-minute games, because then the Pacers would have had a wonderful series. Unfortunately for them, NBA games are 48 minutes, and the final minutes of 3 of the 4 games went as poorly as they could possibly go, including once again tonight in game 4. We'll get run through in a second, but same old song and dance. Cue the Aerosmith, cue the loss. Pacers, it's over. It was a very I hate the phrase competitive sweep. It's stupid. This was a close series, but the end of these games mattered, and the Pacers were not better in any of the endings. They deserve the result they got despite playing largely pretty well through 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the Pacers would settle for 47.5-minute games. I think they would still come out. I think they might actually be
with that. Yeah,
I was going to say it might actually be 2-2 going back to Boston right now with that. But yeah, I mean, consider, game 1 regulation was tied. Game 2 was blowout. Game 3, Pacers lost by 3. Game 4, Pacers lost by 3. Like, they were ultimately 11 points away across 3 games from winning them. And that's just crazy to think about for a team who had no playoff experience, and a team in Boston who had a ton of playoff experience. And Pacers didn't have Haliburton for the last couple of games. Like, it's just overall, it was nice to be there. It was not so nice to see Derek White hit that shot. I was standing, basically my seat was behind him, so I was looking down on it, and I saw him get the ball where he got it. I was like, shoot, that's the Celtics fan next to me that I brought to the game, buddy of mine, was yelling quite a lot, and that made it less pleasant, but still. No, fantastic series. Competitive sweep is just doesn't even make sense, but it also does. And so I'll take that, but it ultimately doesn't matter. They, like you said, they deserve the result they got, unfortunately.
So my brain's a bunch of gobbledygook because it's like a lot going on between the one game that just happened that we're going to talk about, and the full series result that we're going to talk about, and the whole season that is now over after 100 games. And we had some X interviews after the game, and people have offseason questions, and we'll get to the offseason for 2 seconds at the end of this. So there's a lot of gobbledygook that's going to come out of my mouth in the next 30 minutes. We'll get it all as straight as we can. So starting specifically with game 4, as we kind of contextualize the series, right? And actually, let me wrap up the contextualizing the series first, because I told Rhett this before we started recording. You have to be fair with the assessment of these series, to me, of the Pacers. Like, this will be remembered as 4-0, despite how close it was. And I say that because I said after the first 2 rounds, yeah, the teams they played were hurt, and history will remember that they won the series. And that's it, right? Like, no one remember. I asked you, I made you answer who was hurt during the 2014 first 2 rounds. You have no idea. No one remembers, right? Like, that will be what it's like in 10 years from now. And 10 years from now, this will look back on as, oh, they got swept. Like, who knows how close they actually were to being whatever. And so that matters, right? That is a sour result. That sucks, and they deserve that, even though they were close in every game. And so those who saw it and were along the ride and can contextualize were there. So this one, the script again, this one was a little different because in game 1 and game 3, they were ahead in the final 90 seconds. This time they were ahead by 4 with 3 minutes and 33 seconds to go. Let me specifically mention the 3:33 mark where Obi Toppin makes a beautiful play on the baseline, spins around, makes a sweet pass to a cutting Siakam for a bucket, 102.98. The Lawler's Law is intact. The Pacers look good. They're up late again. Everybody is kind of, I don't know. I've seen this movie. They were playing good. They were up. There was no crazy hot runs by the Celtics. The Pacers did not score again in the game, right? That was it. And that's why this one was different, because Tatum dunked right after that. And then Jaylen Brown tied it with 2:40 to go. So this game was tied in the final minute, right? And the Pacers were tied or ahead in the final minute of 3 games in this series. But it never felt as secure this time because they couldn't score late and they were forcing the stops, but they couldn't get it. And you nailed it with 45 seconds to go. Derek White got a very open corner 3. He struggled all night, but he was so open that he's a great shooter. He's going to make one eventually. He made that one, and the Pacers couldn't overcome it. So we can talk about, and we will talk about, the other 45 minutes of this game because there's a lot of good stuff. Andrew Nembhard's coming out party this series will potentially be a turning point of his career to me. But once again, this is what it comes down to. These close margins, and the Celtics were just way better in the final minutes of 3 of these games.
Yeah, no, and the crazy part to me about Derek White hitting that shot is he had one like a minute earlier that was equally as wide open at the on the left wing that he missed, and then I think
Badly.
Tatum missed the 3. Yeah, no, it was not good, and so I mean, great players make great plays, and the Celtics are as talented as they are for good reason, and they're in the finals for good reason. Then they were the best team in the league in the regular season for good reason. Then they're the 1 seed, and this is the benefit of the 1 seed, and that's just how it works. I think we did learn quite a bit about the Pacers as a team, stylistically, individual players. Like Drew, I said this to the Celtics guy during the game. I was like, I can't tell if Drew's run is a fluke, if it should have stopped being a fluke like 15 made shots ago, or if the next shot is going to be the one that makes it like, okay, no, it's not a fluke anymore. And I think that it just obviously wasn't, because he was unbelievable,
Spectacular. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we talked about coming into the series where it's like, oh, if Tyrese Haliburton has to guard Drew Holiday or Derek White, like those are 2 warranted all-star or warranted borderline all-star players, and Nembhard was better than both of them in most of these games, and like that's just a crazy result for this, even though that, like you said, it's gonna be 0-4 and Pacers are gonna lose in the conference finals, but like still a lot of really good stuff came from that. If nothing else, Drew proved to be like, I mean, I don't know what his ceiling was coming into these playoffs, but the player he showed to be was way above what the expectation was coming into the playoffs, for sure.
Yep. See, I made my bold prediction before the season that Andrew Nembhard would be the X factor, and it took 98 games, and they lost both of the 2. But I knew it. Obviously.
His turnovers were the X factor in those games. You're right. That's true.
Yeah. It's a strange ending, right? Because I wonder, at least, had they had Haliburton at home, what does this look like? Because the guy who filled in as point guard was awesome. It's spectacular, right? So what does this actually change? And like the first thought would be, well, he's a great clutch player, but the game he played that they had clutch time, he dribbled it off his foot and didn't play great, right? So like, it's not even worth getting into the weeds of that. So what I will remember about this series 10 years from now, look, most will remember the result. What I will remember is like how close it felt all the time. Like game 2, the Celtics separated. They were great. And they had these big runs a lot in games 1 and 2, but the Pacers truly could hang with them for like long stretches. And that surprised me. Like when Krause and I did our crossover, I said to him I would have picked Celtics in 6 if he didn't, but I didn't want to duplicate him, so I said 7. So I was wrong either way. But I thought that the Pacers could do something to this team, and they were still like pretty close to as good as I thought, despite getting swept. Because in some games like tonight, they needed to defend. They defended very well. Holding the Celtics to 105 is really hard. They needed to score in game 1. They needed to score in game 3. They got the pace up. They did it. They found ways to keep up with a much more talented team. But they needed a little more. And what will also stand out to me when I remember the series, Nembhard was sensational these last 2 games. Siakam was very good early in the series. A lot of their guys who they rely on or play a lot, very few of them played a 48-minute good game. They had a lot of guys who had a good half, a good 3/4, something like that. But against the Celtics, you can't have that. You have to be good the whole game and very focused and not beating yourself and not making mistakes and defending well. And none of those stretches where they just go on a 12 over in 3 minutes and you lose. And they didn't get enough of that to me. And so a lot of my lasting memories will be about the Pacers being good and up to this challenge, but not good enough in like every way by just this much. And that is all that matters. And it's crazy that was the difference, but 4-0 is 4-0.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the this much that the podcast listeners will not be able to quantify is almost the exact amount that it feels like the players on the team might be oversized, like might be overtasked for where they currently are, like in the hierarchy of the team, right? Like if you consider, Neesmith being asked to do just this much more on defense, like guarding the players that he's guarding, and then you ask, Nembhard, he did step up way beyond whatever that vague amount is, but he was being asked to do too much. McConnell being asked to do too much. Obi Toppin coming in and being like, hey, you're going to be the 4/5 small ball, guarding Tatum, sometimes guarding Brown, guarding Horford. Like that is just asking just about everybody down the line to do just a tiny bit too much. And that's not even getting into whether they would have been able to ask them to do less with Haliburton healthy. It's like even with him healthy, they were still like that, the being able to play 3/4 of a game well, and then obviously have some slip ups in the other 10 minutes of play or whatever. Like that is the margins that we're talking about, and the sum of those margins for all those players could end up being the difference between a legitimate contender like the Celtics are and a team like the Pacers, who are building and weren't really expected to even be here. And so taking the learning opportunity of making it somewhere you weren't technically supposed to be but ended up in and should get every ounce of credit that comes along with that. That is another huge takeaway, not even from like the front office perspective, but also from an individual perspective for the players to look at and be like, hey, this was an incredible experience for guys like Drew to be able to play like that, and McConnell to do all the things that he did. Like even Mathurin watching on the sidelines, like I imagine that all the preparation that went into that is going to be valuable. It's just funny to see like it was this much different from everybody. And what do you do with that moving forward?
Yeah, I have the same questions. Okay, I want to talk specifically about this game, but before I do that, I want you had some stats that you wanted to kick up like sand in my face. And I said, Rhett, he told me before everybody, from Inside Baseball, he said, I have stats. Do you want them now or live? And I said, live. So I have not heard these yet. I cannot wait.
So, fourth quarter for this series.
I already don't want it. Yeah, let's go.
Do you know who the lowest total scorer for the fourth quarter was for the Pacers in this series?
Wow. Lowest total fourth, like of everyone who played?
Yes. Of every Pacer, but it's also of everyone who played.
Myles Turner?
No. Tyrese Haliburton.
Oh,
0 points in the fourth quarter across all
Obviously,
games.
he missed 2 games, but still.
Caveat. Yeah. But yes, so Tyrese only played one game.
Yeah.
One fourth quarter. He did score in overtime, so he did recover that. But when I look at it, and it's like, okay, Ty scored, he was 0 for 2. Sam Hauser 0 for 4 in all fourth quarters. O'Shea, Kendall Brown, everyone, and Xavier Tillman, everyone else scored. Peyton Pritchard, Doug McDermott, Stephen Kyluk, Jarris Walker, Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith, like every single player for the Pacers scored except Tyrese Haliburton in the fourth quarter, which is just mind-blowing.
That's just random. Like, that doesn't mean
It
anything. He's only
is.
played in
No,
one, but that's crazy. Yeah.
it is. But the actual stat that I wanted to get to, it was just I sorted by points and I just like scrolled down and saw
That's wild.
Xavier
Okay.
Tillman, Tyrese Haliburton, Sam Hauser. The other one is the Celtics had 4 of the top 6 fourth quarter scoring totals for the
Wow.
series, which checks out because the
Yeah.
Pacers choked a bunch of fourth quarters. They had the better player in every single game because Halliburton didn't play in the last 2, and generally, obviously, he didn't score in the fourth quarter he did play, so that wasn't great. But the Celtics top 3 scored 70 points in fourth quarters. The Pacers top 3 of Nembhard, Siakam, McConnell scored 45,
Wow.
55. So like you just can't have your top 3 get outscored by 15 and then also have another 20 points added on there from those top players. So like the fourth quarter was the problem for the series in every single game. Like it's not an accident that the Pacers lost by such a small margin for 3 of the games, because that's when the talent of the Celtics came through and they just smoked the Pacers in those minutes. But it also comes into the conversation we just had about, should TJ McConnell be your top 3 fourth quarter scorer in the series against the Celtics in the conference finals? No, no, he should not. And so, like, ultimately, that is the series. That is what happened. And I just found that really, really fascinating for a group of players in Nembhard, Siakam, and McConnell who all shot. Like Nembhard, 22 fourth quarter points, 50% shooting. Siakam, 18 fourth quarter points, 64% shooting.
Wow.
TJ McConnell, 15 fourth quarter points, 47% shooting. Like it was legitimately good play. It just didn't matter because the Celtics were outright better.
So I'm going to talk about those 3 players specifically as a microcosm at the end of game 4. Hey guys, short little break so we can talk about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150. That's a lot in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that you can bet on all your faves, the spreads, the money lines, the player props, and plenty more. And all you got to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up and make every playoff shot count, and you win that first $5 bet. You'll get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You talk about those 3 guys as the top scorers, right? And it's funny to look at that because they closed this game. To be clear, Myles Turner he didn't play well, and he was dealing with some back issues. So there were some funky front court lineups, but they closed this game with McConnell in there and then Toppin and Siakam and Nesmith. And I only say that to say, so that's all 3 of their top scorers, Nembhard, McConnell, Siakam. And all series I've said, the Pacers, when they look at adjustments or tweaks or lineups or whatever, they have to think offense every time, because to me, they can't stop the Celtics. They need to try to keep up with them. So in specifically game 4, problem number 1 is the group that I think should be out there to score did not score, right? They didn't score for the last 3.5 minutes of the game. But the other ripple of this is, and this is what makes the Celtics so good, is by doing that lineup, which I think was the right choice, is you can't stop all their stars with that group, because one of White, Holiday, and the Jays has a mismatch. You could and Toppin got picked on a lot down the stretch of this game, and they went big with him at the 3 a few times, and that worked. But when they went smaller, it was tough. Again, Myles' injury was a factor, but it was tough. And then the other factor is McConnell has to guard either White or Drew. And if it's Drew can post up. So that's not like that safe. It's fine. He did well enough. But, so it's just a tough matchup in general. And I guess you could say it's because the Pacers are small, but they needed to have their best offensive five out there in the series to keep up, to me. So I thought that was the right choice to close with. And that group did not produce offensively. So obviously you could say that's a problem. McConnell missed a 17-footer that he was making all game. Nesmith missed an open 3. Siakam had a turnover that certainly he wants back, of course. So did Nembhard. But it's just kind of what it was. And they couldn't do it late. And that sums up the series to me, is that keeping up the Celtics is hard. The Pacers couldn't match up with them anyway. And then when the decisions they had to make to keep up really sacrifice stopping those guys. I mean, the Celtics didn't even play that good in this game. And Drew Holiday shot over 50%, and Derek White shot 50%, and Jaylen Brown shot 50%. Tatum had 26, 13, and 8 and shot under 50%, but still, like, they're so good. So that the ending of specifically game 4 was just like a very zoomed in look at the challenges they faced in this series, specifically with how good the Celtics were, picking lineups, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and I think almost the style of play, like what the Celtics were able to do to close games, ties back into the other fun, not so fun stat that I looked at, is that the Celtics took that Tatum, Brown, Drew took 19 free throws in the fourth quarter. Do you know how many fourth quarter free throws the Pacers took, and do you know the top 3 players who took them? I'm gonna say no to both of those for you. If you want to guess, you can go ahead.
I think their free throw total is going to be 11.
The free throw total for the top 3 Pacers is 7.
Oh man!
And I think for the Pacers as a whole, it probably is 11 exactly for the fourth quarter.
I was trying to do their team numbers in my head and work backwards.
Okay, yeah. So Andrew Nembhard, 3 of 3 from the line in fourth quarters. Great. Isaiah Jackson, 1 of 2, is the other fourth quarter. He's the second.
Oh, wow.
And then Jalen Smith, tied for second. Yep, wow. 1 of 2 from the line. And that is the top 3 free throw attempts in the fourth quarter for the Pacers in this series. In this series is 2 guys who played a single game in the fourth quarter. And that is Isaiah Jackson, 1 game, 9 minutes. Jalen Smith, 1 game, 7 minutes. Those were the 2 most free throw attempts taken in the fourth quarter. Like, that is such a drastic difference in a game where you are at a talent deficit and you are playing off of like insane energy.
Yeah.
To not be able to get some easy points and get to the rim. Like, even though I was very frustrated in the way the Celtics played, they just didn't attack the rim despite being at a talent and size.
We in Media Row were like, what are they doing? Like, a lot.
Yeah. Tatum had that dunk towards the end of the fourth quarter, and we were like, wow, hey, you can do that, man.
You do that every time.
Just go do that. Like, Drew Holiday was posting up Obi Toppin and getting and ones. Like, what are you guys doing? Just get to the rim. But
we had the same.
Yeah, it's just crazy to see the difference in what those fourth quarters looked like from a talent and process standpoint. But ultimately, like, the Pacers were outmatched from the get-go. That is what it is. That's the difference between a contender and a not.
Okay, so I said if the games were 46 minutes, the Pacers would have had a great series. Let's talk about some of the stuff that mattered in that 46 minutes before we put a bow on this series, season, etc. So the Pacers did a lot of the stuff that they didn't do in game 3 a little better. They shot better from 3. They did well enough on the glass. They cut their turnovers down. Thought the right guys had the ball a lot. A big theme of this loss, I said let's talk about good stuff, and I'm already doing a bad stuff. The math problem strikes again without Haliburton, right? They shot it better. They made 10 threes in this game. That's good. They only attempted 29, and so that's 34.1%. So they shot a better percentage from 3 than the Celtics. But the Celtics made 4 more, and that is relevant because the Celtics were 40 for 89 in this game and made 11 free throws, and the Pacers were 40 for 87 in this game and made 12 free throws. So 4-3 difference is huge when you're really even like everywhere else. Rebounding 47 to 44. Very close. Free throws were 1 apart. Assists were 2 apart. Blocks were really close. Fouls were 18 to 19. Like, turnovers and steals were a little skewed in the Celtics' favor, and they made more threes. So the math problem was back, and that is where Haliburton is so valuable, as he gets you way beyond the many brilliant things he does. He's a very good player. Is he gets you to the math problem, and the Celtics were all season one of the best shooting teams in terms of the talent to get them up, creating them, and making them. And you saw that even on a night they didn't shoot well, it was so super valuable for them. Like, I was prepared to talk about this being a bad variance game for the Celtics and helping the Pacers, and it didn't matter. So that's my end thesis here: is the Pacers and Haliburton is critical to them, the 3-point specific part of their offense. Okay. Andrew Nembhard was we talked about him a little bit. 24 and 10 was his final stat line. 6 boards, made 3 threes, got to the basket again. These two games were like the thing that will be seared in my brain about if this is a turning point for him. It's two games. I don't want to get so far ahead of myself. He had that amazing game last year in Golden State, and like, he's obviously a better player, but like it didn't turn into something incredible immediately. But he was so good in these games. The thing that stood out to me is like he got to the rim on drives. He got past defenders on drives. So much more valuable as an attacker. It makes a defense rotate. It makes passing angles there. So the Pacers' points in the paint weren't as high as they were earlier in the series, but he specifically was transformative in the way that he was doing all of that. And I thought that was the thing that kind of separated this injured Nembhard from what we've seen before. And if he can be that kind of guy, that just makes their backcourt ceiling so much higher going forward.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things once Mathurin went out was like, oh, rim pressure. Like, where are we gonna get that from? Because it's been Mathurin and McConnell. Like that's basically been the only two guys who routinely and consistently, like just relentlessly get to the rim. And Nembhard's ability to do that against Drew Holiday and Derek White, like a lot of times it was against all defense level defenders. And even then, if it's like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, those are really big wings. Those are really big forwards.
Yeah.
Like those are not the kind of players that you would expect a guy like Nembhard to take off the dribble like that. And so I just can't I can't praise him enough. And you know, like you said, being able to see him do those, like play in that way is just crazy because what does that do for a guy like Haliburton when Nembhard can play like that? It especially just to take the pressure off of him as a shot creator and as an engine of the offense if the team's going to ramp up pressure in a certain way. Like you just cannot praise Nembhard enough. At like 24, 4 and 8, like for averaging in the conference against the Celtics, that is nuts.
I didn't realize it's where I thought you were talking about this game. I didn't realize that was his series stats.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm looking at 35 minutes a game, 21 points, 7.8 assists, 4 rebounds, 1.8 turnovers a game is what this says.
The bench was good in this game. And usually that is a TJ McConnell thing, and he was good as well. Rhett, I'm glad you got to experience TJ McConnell in person in Indy because it's just a little different the way he feeds off the crowd and like at the most random moments decides to hype someone up or hype something up and like randomly walking through a Celtics timeout and like O'Shea Brissett's trying to box him out of the bench. Like it's just all that stuff that is the reason he gets like he'll check in for Tyrese Haliburton, the best player on the team, and the fans are like, yeah, it's wild. And he was great once again. 15, 5, and 4 for McConnell. They won his minutes. And when he plays like that, and Obi also made his shots, which was a key part of this, the bench is typically good as a unit, which was key in this game. They could get those guys in more lineups. They closed with 2 of those guys. Isaiah Jackson was good enough. He was great on the glass. And I can't believe it. I was wrong about this. McDermott had a good game. Doug McDermott played well. He made his only shot. He had 3 assists. Doug McDermott actually played pretty well and had some, again,
rim protector.
Some okay defensive moments these last 2 games. Very interesting. So I think a lot of people, including me, have to take an L on that one. He actually like closed the series okay. So the bench was good. That was important because Nembhard was great. Siakam was pretty good, although didn't shoot it amazing in this game. Their other role-playing starters were not good. Myles hurt his back, and he had 2 huge threes to start the second half, which kept the Pacers in it. I think they were winning after he made the second one, but his impact was not there at all tonight. 4 turnovers, 5 fouls. Not a great season for him. Not a good ending to it. Shepard shot just never got there this series. He finally made his first 3 of the series. It was his only make of the series in that way. And Nesmith, the 3 also never fell for him. He did some good stuff. He had 14 points. He got to the line a bunch, but they needed more from one of them, I think, finishing plays to win this game, and they didn't get it. So that's why they were mixing and matching the bench so much and why it wasn't, a more separated first 46 minutes like it was in game 3.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't feel when I was watching it like Nesmith was playing poorly because he was doing a lot of good things. But now looking at the box score and be like, oh, he was 4 of 11 shooting and 1 of 6 from 3. It's like that is, you just aren't gonna win when you're 35 minute a night starting small forward shoots like that in a game where you're already down, like you said, your best 3-point shooter. Like, you're just not going to do that. And then Myles, I think I tweeted it out. I don't know if it was in the middle of the first quarter or like late first quarter, something like that. I tweeted, I was like, hey, Myles looks frustrated, and I'm not sure that that's going to make for a good night for him. And that played out very, very accurately as the game went on. And thankfully, Obi, like you said, stepped up and was able to, you know, make that not, I mean, obviously not having Myles out there is a drastically different look than having Obi Toppin out there. So it wasn't like, I don't think that's the story of the game, but collectively between Nesmith, Turner, and Shepherd, like having the limited contributions that we got from all of them against a team like the Celtics just is not going to be good enough.
And it wasn't. I mean, as close as they were, as close as this series was, it's going to be so hard to remember this whole playoff run correctly because of how much context will be required. But it wasn't, and it's a sweep. And I hate to end like talking about the game like this because, again, there was so many good things. My next show will be playoff takeaways for the Pacers. So many positive things for them to walk away from this postseason, like happy about. But it ends with a sweep, and that is not a positive thing. And I know a lot of fans rightly will think they're so close in so many games, a sweep is not reflective of the series. And it's not. That's right. But the result, again, if I'm going to say what I said about the first rounds, I have to say it about this round. The result is what history will show you, and that is painful and sour. Do you have any more thoughts on Game 4 or the series, or would you like to pivot only briefly, because I'll have lots of time to dive into all this, the offseason, Rhett?
I cannot believe that was not a flagrant one, but that is the final thought I have for Game 4.
Yeah, that was a good point. We should talk about that. So I have a take, and it's probably wrong. I need a good side view replay. Does he actually hit him in the face?
Yes.
It looks like his arm like goes across him and hits him on the right shoulder and knocks him down. I got to hang on. I got a good point from someone. If you get hit in the right shoulder really hard and it causes your head to snap into the ground, should that count as head contact? And I said, that's a good point. That does count. So
that's a good point.
Way, I think that maybe it should have been a flagrant when that point got made to me. I can't tell if he actually gets banged in the face right there. But if he did, if the side view shows he did, yes, then that's it. It should be a flagrant immediately.
And then it wasn't though. So like that's the thing for me is like what obviously in the arena we only got one replay, and so they didn't call it. So like I have to assume that there was something, but
yeah,
TJ hit the ground so hard. I don't know if it came across on TV, but
so
he hit
hard,
so hard, and so that was the only thing. I could not believe it. Didn't have a ton of great looks, but the sound of him hitting the floor was like, golly. And then he missed the 17-footer that he hasn't missed in the entire series. And so like there it is. No one will remember that TJ McConnell didn't get a flagrant foul on that and then didn't hit his 17-footer. And that is not the difference in the series. But shout out to Celtics not needing to use Porzingis in the series at all. And I think that'll really help them in the finals. And that is all that I had for Game 4.
Yeah, McConnell left the game and then people were booing. And then it turns out his head didn't look like it hit the ground as much as I thought, but the whiplash was more than I thought. So brutal. And he came back and didn't even miss a second of play. Very resilient, very big thing for him. All right, Rhett. What a weird offseason this is shaping up to be. Weird is not the word I will use the whole offseason, but there's just kind of a lot of strange moving parts. So I'm going to just ramble for I'll try to keep it shorter, and then I'll let you react to it, and then we can get a little more nitty-gritty about what's going on. First of all, this is the most asked question I've gotten tonight from fans. How much cap space do the Pacers have this offseason? Before I rant, the answer to that is zero. They don't have any. They have no cap space this summer. If they do end up with cap space for some reason, something has gone horribly, terribly wrong in their summer, and then, they'd have cap space, but something went horribly wrong. Okay, so here's my, as my internet appears to be dying, here's my short rant about the offseason. It is so tempting and smart and right in front of them and maybe correct. In fact, tempting was the wrong word to use there because it's not tempting in a bad way. Like to run it back. You just made the conference finals. And so they're free agents.
Justifiable.
Who was good for them and grew a lot in their system. And Yeah, very. Justifiable is a perfect word for it. And Pascal Siakam, who is priority one, that will be the thing this offseason talked about the most. Pascal Siakam, retaining him, keeping him, do whatever it takes. I have a different opinion on that than fans. I understand that. Whatever. So that is a very interesting thing. And I say that because running it back has merit. It also runs into a wall of Ben Mathurin and Jarris Walker are on the team right now and ready to play. And so if you run it back, are you willing to, as the Pacers or as a fan, have another season of Jarris Walker not playing, or have a season where Ben Shepherd, who's just in your conference finals rotation, not playing? And if the answer is no, then running it back makes less sense. And so there's a lot of weird dynamic parts where it's like you don't want to take a step back on purpose. So do you really want to be playing those young guys? And if you're playing young guys, are you getting better? You're trying to build off a conference final season. And if you're trying to get better, are you trying to sign an external free agent to add to your team? Then you're already benching guys already talked about that might not be playing if you run it back. So there's a lot of signs that point to, like, at some point, a consolidation trade, and maybe it's not right now. And there's a lot of signs that point to the trickiness of how they have to handle the re-signing of their own free agents. But there's a lot of emotion that's going to be involved in what they do this summer. There's a lot of overlapping goals. There's a lot of pieces on different timelines. And that's why weird is the word I started with, and it was wrong. But their offseason is going to be this is the theme. I typed this down forever ago. After they traded Buddy Hield, I typed this in my Excel sheet document that has every note I want to bring up on Locked On Pacers at some point. I am titling this the Summer of Hard Decisions for the Pacers. This is step one of getting to the next stage. I've said this to you a million times. We talk about team building a fair amount. And you know I'm a crawl, walk, run guy. That's how you build your team to be as sustainable, as long-term as the current NBA allows you to be a contender. What happens when the first time you start walking, you make the conference finals? That's why this will be such a weird and challenging summer for the Pacers front office with their resources and team that they have, and rant about why it will be hard. And we can dive into the specifics of those throughout the summer, but it's going to be really fascinating.
Yeah, I wrote something about this last January, actually, when it was right before Haliburton went out with his injury. And so the Pacers were like kind of making a playoff push in a season they weren't really expected to. And I wrote crawl, walk, run, almost exactly that. And referencing the Atlanta fluky conference finals run and the Portland fluky conference finals run, where both of those teams ran it back the following season. And hey, when you
Dallas.
overachieve, you know what that means? That means you weren't expected to be there. So running it back with the same team that you weren't expected to get to the conference finals does not all of a sudden make you you don't expect to get to the conference finals again. It's overachieving for a reason. That being said, this Pacers situation is drastically different because they made a huge move already. Like, so that's the thing. Like, if you can't look at it as in terms of seasons, because Siakam came through and you made a big move. You didn't pay a huge price relative to the player that Siakam is, but you're going to the summer, like in the form of free agency. Like, he will, if he stays here, it will be at a relatively large number. And then you have to consider both the continuity aspect of keeping him while also trying to figure out what it looks like to run from that point moving forward. And if you are simultaneously signing a guy like Siakam to a max, Tyrese Haliburton just made All NBA, so he's now a 30% of the cap player. Like, Myles Turner is an unrestricted free agent after next season. It gets really, really tight, and that doesn't even get into the financial aspect of guys like Isaiah Jackson and Bennedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker and Ben Shepherd and Andrew Nembhard, like the contracts of those guys coming up. So there is an argument that right this very second, you have the most financial flexibility you will ever have in a team building construct, and that makes it a summer of extremely hard decisions, because it's not just of one decision for this summer. It is what that decision means for the next summer and the next summer and the next summer. And then you have to consider what you adjust to in the middle of it too, like giving yourself that optionality that KP loves to talk about. Like, I am absolutely fascinated what to do with a team who's going to have potentially two max players at positions that make it so that your two lottery picks don't play very much, but then try to keep those lottery picks on the roster and involved enough to foster their development. It's very, very rare to thread that needle.
You know me, and I've said this a lot talking to anybody. As long as what needs to be important to me is every move goes the same direction, right? If they
Yes.
opt to go a path that is some sort of run it back, and let's see, they're young naturally, right? So even if they run it back, the hope would be their young guys are better. But then like run it back, and Jarris and Ben are playing more next year. Great, that makes sense to me. But don't do that, and then also go get a vet who buries a different young guy, right?
Keep
And
Doug
that's
McDermott and Ben Shepherd
why
up play.
their trades this season were confusing to a lot of people. They went and got Siakam and they traded away, but right? And so the opposite could also be true. Like if you go spend or trade, that's a new thing. They can trade the MLE. If you use the MLE to get a good player, and it looks like your plan for the summer is take a step forward, maybe Neesmith's coming off the bench or Nemhard's coming off the bench next year to get another good wing on the team somehow. Don't do that and then go, well, also Jarris Walker's in rotation next year. It's like, well that, so there is merit to both of those paths, right? Both of those make a ton of sense. They will not get killed for either one. I would be all on board with those directions for the Pacers. They had a good year. It's very easy to build off of because they have the flexibility, but they have to pick one of those paths. That's always my take on this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of ways to do it. So it's really hard to mess up where they are, but you're right that they have to worry about money in the future. They're fortunate that Siakam's free agency is the summer before the big cap jump. So that actually does help them in that like 2 or 3 years. They'll be a little bit wiggled free from financial yikes, but they might have a year of it. So I can't believe it, but the T word's coming this summer. The tax word is coming. I have different opinions on the tax and fans. I'll explain that at a later date, but I hope this 9-minute discussion of Rhett and I just yelling about team building theory has explained appropriately why this will be a very tricky summer for the Pacers. And to end my rant, the Pacers free agents this summer, for those unaware or don't know, are Pascal Siakam, Doug McDermott, Obi Toppin, Kendall Brown, James Johnson, all three of their two-way guys, and maybe who has a player option, Jalen Smith. We'll see. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised that we got that in under 10 minutes for both of us, because I know that we could both rant for quite a while about team building and roster construction and all of the tax. I said the wrong word, the nasty word.
It's okay. Okay.
All of those,
okay
all of those
really
implications. Yeah, no, it is, and I believe we share the thoughts on that on different than fans. So I don't know. It is going to be unbelievable. We can circle back to that, and I can't wait to see it. I'm sad that this season is over, but I think because it was a postseason of overachieving, I'm excited to see what comes next from that, because ultimately, like you said, there isn't a wrong decision as long as those decisions they match up and they agree with each other, because the two timeline situation, unless you end up in a Golden State situation that is so incredibly rare, and you could even argue that two timelines thing wasn't about the young guys at all. It was just about being stubborn with not trading those young guys while your vets came together, and Andrew Wiggins ended up being the second best player on a finals team somehow.
And yet, if they keep Pascal, the lowest possible grade I'll give their summer is like a C-, right? So maybe that's all it takes. We'll see. He'd be the best free agent signing in team history by a lot. And again, I will explain this in a whole show previewing his free agency, but I guarantee I have different takes on Pascal's free agency than much of the fan base, which is kind of crazy. Rhett, your time as the closer has come to an end. There is no more closing to do unless you're trying to come on after like the Summer League championship game or something.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'll have some takes ready.
Talking about presumably Jarris will play in Summer League. That'll be fun. And whoever they draft and all that. So it'll be interesting. Ben Shepherd might play again. It'll be fun. Anyway, offseason's coming. Plenty of offseason stuff coming. And season reviews are coming. A lot less time than normal. Like a month and a half less than normal. So trying to squeak in all the draft, free agency, season review, player recaps as I can before the draft, which is less than a month away, which is crazy. Rhett, thank you for the time. Where can people find you and what you have to say about the Pacers, the NBA, etc.?
Yeah, I will probably have a lot of offseason thoughts and a lot of roster construction things. That's one of my favorite things to talk about now that the basketball is finally over. But that sounded like an expected thing. I'm sad that the basketball's over, but it is over. So now we can move on to the construction of the basketball team. No, find me on Twitter at Rhett_Bauer. Would love to hear about everyone's terrible trade ideas and how awesome mine are.
The offseason and draft are fun because of playoff runs like this. I had to remind people of that perspective every time. Looking forward to it. Thank y'all for listening all season. Crazy, Rhett, multi-time guest. Thank you for hopping on with me, everybody. Be back tomorrow. No more weekend episodes, most likely, unless duty calls for that. But lots to get into, lots coming. Thank y'all for listening. Have a great day. See you soon.